a letter was sent about us around the Spanish-speaking ministers in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean, letting everyone know that we were no longer members and they needed to be careful with what we were teaching because it was false teaching.
Component to mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid. Interested in this subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of my podcast, Cult Conversations, the Influence Continuum with Dr. Steve Hassan. And I have with me Tania Diaz today. I'm very excited, Tania, that you consented to speak with us to share your firsthand experience with a cult that I've actually been helping people out of since I think it was about 1982.
Wow.
A cult that I actually included in my first book, Combating Cult Mind Control, in 1988. It's
That's
a
correct.
version of a Christian church that is not truly following Christian principles. It's known as a shepherding discipleship group. We'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to say a few more things about you before we get into this.
Thank you.
That you are originally from Mexico. Your ancestry was indigenous, was Zapoteca. Is that pronounced correctly?
That's perfect.
And you are a citizen of the United States with a green card and were basically recruited into this cult way back when it was called the Boston Church of Christ. It's morphed into a number of different names, but its founding leader is Kip McKean. Again, I wrote about it in Combating Cult Mind Control.
Yeah.
And it's now going by the name International Churches of Christ, but you can share a number of other names. You're going to share all about this. But you got recruited in Mexico. You were brought to Boston. You were a member and a leader for 20 years. You were enlisted to recruit other Latine people to expand the cult into Central and South America and other Spanish-speaking countries.
Yeah.
And what else? You left, so you got recruited in 1995 and exited in 2023. So we're recording this in 2025. So relatively recently you've left, and you want to bring awareness to all Latine people, Spanish-speaking people, because there are many mind control cults, especially claiming to be following the Bible, but they're following individuals who claim to be prophets or apostles, like Kip McKean claimed to be God's greatest gift on earth. And what's different about these types of shepherding discipleship cults, if I might say before we start, is that you are assigned a discipling partner who's in the relationship like Jesus over you, and you have to divulge all personal details to this person who then divulges to their discipleship partner up the pyramid. Of course, Kip didn't need a discipler because he was at the top of the pyramid. But the idea is that they would literally dictate everything they want to know when you woke up in the morning, tell you what you were studying if you were a college student and recruited. I should say this group particularly went after college students on campuses, not revealing their true nature. And break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your husband or wife if they don't want to join. Give money, lots of pressure to give, sell your jewelry and give money, etc. And this is a worldwide cult, but it's one of many types of these discipling cults.
Yeah.
And lastly, I'm going to ask you to pronounce the name of your podcast because it's in Espanol. It is called
Voces, un espacio sagrado para sobrevivientes.
Fantastic. I want to learn Spanish. I have to confess that I am challenged with learning foreign languages, but I really want to learn Spanish. We're actually working on a updated Spanish edition of Combating Cult Mind Control. My BITE model and Influence Continuum and dissertation was translated into Espanol at the request of Xochitl Martins, a woman that I interviewed for this podcast, who is in La Luz del Mundo. She lives in L.A. This was a Mexican group. The leader is now in jail, but she was fourth generation. But anyway, thanks to her, she's great activist, and she's like, we got to translate your stuff into Spanish. And I'm like, please do. So with that, Tania, welcome to Cult Conversations. Thank you for sharing your journey.
Oh my goodness, Stephen, this is such a pleasure. I'm so thankful. I feel like this is definitely part of my recovery journey, my getting stronger and healthier recovery, and being part, like getting to sit down with you and tell my story. Like this is I cannot believe it. This is amazing. And it is also definitely thanks to Xochitl Martin, who I love her. You know what a powerhouse she is. And I'm very thankful to her too, because she was the way we got connected. And the other thing I want to say is how moving it is to listen to you, how well you know the cold I got out. Like you described it so perfectly. And you know, those feelings that when I was listening to you describing the Boston Church of Christ or the International Churches for Christ, I felt like I wish I knew at 18 years old when I was recruited in Mexico City National University. So yeah, everything started there. I was 18, as you mentioned. The Boston Church of Christ has to this day has this hyper focus on proselytizing, recruiting young students, college students. And it is not random, as you perfectly know. It is not random. Right. I know I was looking for purpose. I know I was full of ideals. I know I was feeling like I want to make a difference in this world. And, you know, and other vulnerabilities, right? Like my own story, my upbringing, you name it. And definitely that presence, like when Boston sent the mission to Mexico City, that happened in 1984. Mexico City was a big window for this cult, because that meant from Mexico, they will expand to the rest of Central America and South America and the Caribbean. Right. So conquering Mexico City was like super important. They sent their missionaries. They hardly spoke Spanish. They were like recruiting everywhere, following a script in Spanish, because most of them wouldn't even speak the language. But going to the National University was definitely very important spot to go. I got there when it was 1995. It was the indoctrination process, as you mentioned, Stephen, is very aggressive too. Like I was invited. This is very interesting, because when I was thinking like what I was invited to, first I was invited to a Christian conference where they were going to talk about values and living a good life, but it was never named as a church. I didn't know I was going to attend a church.
So I'm going to interrupt you for just a second and say you were 18, didn't know anything, were lied to. I was 19, didn't know anything. I'm curious, were you recruited by a good-looking guy? Because I was recruited by good-looking girls. I'm just curious.
I was trying to find sense of my own faith, and I was doubting my, upbringing, Catholic upbringing, and I was actually
like most Mexicans, I would add,
exactly
is Catholic.
And I wanted to study the Bible, and it was not one individual. They had this poster on, one of the buildings in my at my college, calling them Bible studies. And I was like, maybe before becoming an atheist, which was my goal, I would study the Bible but I don't know how, and they studied the Bible. So, but that group was a mix of Christians from different churches who got together to study the Bible. But instead of meeting them, I met a member of the ICOC, of the Boston Church, Mexico City.
Right.
And she was like, oh my God, God sent you, because I studied the Bible with people. And I was like, whatever, I don't mind who, I just want to study the Bible.
Right. And God sent, me to become one of the first joiners. I was at Queens College at the time. The women who recruited me spoke very little English. They were actually Japanese.
Wow.
But they flirted me, invited me for dinner. And I asked, are you part of a religious group or something? Oh, no. Are you students? Oh, yes. And they just lied. And I took their word, and I didn't, double check it or whatever.
Yeah, why you would doubt of any of them, right?
Because they're so clean and healthy. They're anti-drugs, they're anti-alcohol, and they look you straight in the eye, and they love bomb you. Oh, you're so special, Steve. And I'll just add one more thing about these types of cults is because this was a group that I had so many clients, people who were in it, left and wanted help, or families hired me to help intervene. And I made a friend with a mainstream Church of Christ minister from Cape Cod, a fellow from Texas who was on Cape Cod named Buddy Martin.
Wow.
With a Texas accent and everything. And so he taught me what the Church of Christ denomination that had 2 million members and was around since the 1800s. And he taught me the difference. And he said, when you're a Christian, you're saved by grace. You're not saved by works. But cults like the Boston movement, now the International Churches of Christ, they put so much pressure on people to recruit, to show their faithfulness. Yeah. And if you don't succeed in getting a lot of people, you have sin. You need to be rebaptized, in many cases over and over and over again. But this emphasis on success, and we'll talk more, but I'll just say Buddy Martin is the man I credit for calling my model the bite model.
Wow.
Because in my original book, my 1988 version of Combating, I had the 4 components, but it was a different order. And Buddy said, this was many years later, he said, Steve, if you change the order, you can call it the bite model and people can remember it. And I'm like, Buddy, can I use that? It's a really good idea. And he's like, of course, you can do it. So now there's millions of people, you can Google bite model, and there are millions and millions of hits because it's helped so many people leave cults.
Yeah.
Back to your story. You're at college. Can I ask what you were studying?
Yeah, I was studying international relations, and that what made me a little special from the beginning. There was no cumbered from that specific we called it faculties, but from that specific area of studies, political studies, international relations, and I was that people, meaning the students from that specific areas. Those people are so hard. They're very intellectual. They're like they said stories like they're like the Greeks with Paul. They want to know about everything, but they won't get in, like they won't engage. They won't give themselves to the movement. So, but that's why it was like very soon everyone knew about me. Everyone was praying for me because if I was converted, then that door will be open for more members for the cult. I didn't know any of those. So,
and that was my story too. They were just love bombing me because they were not successful. I was the first to join the Flushing Queens Center.
wow.
God has a special mission for you. You've been summoned to save the world for
Yeah,
God, and
totally,
blah, blah,
totally.
blah.
And I remember being told things like, you know how you dream about being one day like an ambassador or working for international relations, like the how about being the ambassador of Christ? Like it's everywhere in the Bible, being sent, being the ambassador, being the representative. Like it was it was pretty clever to connect those dots.
It's part of the recruiting technique is to find out what people's past interests and to see if they can warp it
Yeah,
to their best
totally,
interests.
totally.
And you were idealistic and you wanted to make the world a better place, and you had a curiosity about the Bible, and you didn't know how do I research what's a legitimate Christian Bible study or a cult. It probably never even entered your
No,
mind.
not at all. And like my family was not even really connected to their own Catholicism. So we have no idea about evangelicals. Ever in my life visited or yeah, know about, maybe not even met personally an evangelical person or Jehovah Witness. I have no idea. Those were like words very far away from my conscience. And when I get there, I feel like, well, this feels like church. But it was a region, it was called a region of only students. So imagine the electricity, the love bombing of 200 students led by another college student. Like,
Right.
what was there? Like, everyone looked beautiful, young, full of energy, passionate by something. And in this
Right.
case, it was the kingdom of God. I got baptized 15 days after I started studying the Bible.
So that's another parallel between you and me, because the Moonies didn't do baptisms, but I got recruited very quickly, and they told me to drop out of college and devote myself and fast and pray and study the divine principle, which was their teaching. The Moonies, and Moon claimed to be 10 times greater than Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And the Mooney Bible was the completed testament. So it was the Old and New Testament. This explained, presumably, everything about the Old and New Testament. Of course it didn't, but that was the belief.
Totally.
And I got swept up. They found out I was a creative writing major, and they, pretty much early on asked me what my Isaac was, and Abraham was asked to sacrifice his beloved son. They taught as a test. I've since come to understand a different interpretation of that experience that Abraham had. But I said, they said, what's your Isaac, Steve? And I said, I don't know. And they said, we think your poetry is. Do you love God enough to sacrifice your beloved poetry? And I'm like, I guess so. And they brought a garbage pail, and they said, go get your poetry. And I threw out my original poetry.
Yeah.
Which I later came to understand, this is about breaking someone's sense of self and identity, because the old Steve was satanic, and my parents were my physical parents, and now Moon and his wife are my true parents.
Oh my God, yeah.
So, as part of my cult identity. So let's stay with your story, because many of my listeners have heard my story. So how long did you stay in Mexico, and at what point did they bring you to Boston?
Oh, okay, so I definitely got in with everything. I was asked to, like, what would you sacrifice to follow Jesus and become a true disciple? Disciple equals Christian, true Christian, only true Christians are disciples, and only disciples are saved. That's like the formula keep developed in in a small, phrase. And I felt like, oh my goodness, maybe my school. I was an athlete. I used to represent
Oh,
Mexico in my sport, and I definitely felt like
tell us your
it is
sport
a very
before you
like
go
and
on.
not very common one. But I used to do roller speed skating, and I made it to the world championship, and those things.
Roller speeds
I know.
skating. That's amazing. I've never
I
heard
know
of
it's very
that.
similar to ice speed skating, but with inline
Uh-huh.
skates. Anyways, and I was like, yeah, I think I need to give up everything, even the idea of dating that was stated during the
Mm.
studies. You can only date people from, true disciples, which meant
Yeah, inside
which
the
meant
cult
people from
with
exactly.
permission.
Anyway, so fast forward, I really went into it like I was considered someone with potential, leadership potential. Very early, I started leading groups with a man because obviously women cannot lead by themselves. Men is the head and they need to lead. And I like grew up in the ranks. I would say, obviously, the first years were non-paid labor, but labor. I mean,
Sure.
8 hours, even when I was a full-time student,
Yeah.
and not having money to eat some days, but everything was for God, for the kingdom, for Jesus.
Right.
Anyway, so I became a missionary for the first time. I was discipled by someone
Mm.
who was sent to the first ever mission team sent by Mexico City. Remember, Boston sent Mexico City, and Mexico City sent Honduras. That was the first country Mexico planted the cult. And one of these missionaries
Mm-hmm.
came back and started discipling me, as you know, a supervisor, someone who you tell everything, all your sins,
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing, ask permission. They call it ask for advice, it's permission, it's control. And
Totally.
I was like, I need to be a missionary, and I made it. I made it to the group, to the mission team, and it was sent to La Habana.
Mm-hmm.
There in Havana, I was what, 21, only 21 years old.
So
La
Havana,
Havana, Cuba.
Cuba, to
Yes.
be okay,
Oh
just to
yeah.
be clear, I thought that's what you were relating, but they tell you where to go, right? You
Oh no,
don't
no, no.
choose
But
it.
my dream was that I prayed, I fasted, and they accept me to go there. I left my career in
Mm,
pause. I didn't finish my degree with 6 months, only one
mm-hmm.
semester left, and
Oh,
no one there was considerate enough to say like, "Hey, it's just 6 months. Wait, finish your degree." No.
no, they want the group to come first. Are you kidding? I've counseled people over the years who were in med school and they were told to change their major because they had classes the same day as Bible study, and Bible study was more important than med
Obviously,
school.
yeah.
The story after story. My friend Chris Lee, who's the webmaster for reveal.org, which is the best resource of ex-members, was going to be a rocket scientist at
I know.
MIT. And they talked him into abandoning his
I know.
career.
Oh yeah.
Brilliant man.
So yeah, at that moment of my life, Stephen, I already believed international relations was worthless. I was not going to save
Mm,
anyone. So whatever,
mm,
whatever. And my
right.
parents were, I don't know, loving and patient. They were not members of the cult at the time, and they didn't make any drama. They didn't want me to cut ties with them, so they just supported. Like
Mm,
they just wanted to be close to me all the time.
right.
They were separated at the time, but both were like, if that's what you want, how can we support you? And I went there
Mm,
believing with all my heart. It was six of us. pretending to be students because Cuba won't allow you to stay longer than 30 or 60 days with a tourist visa. We pretended we went to school, all of us, and to be able to stay. And when we got there, I knew all of us, we believed if Jesus comes today, only the 6 of us will be saved. And 11 millions of Cubans will be lost. 21 years old, I had all the answers. All people needed. I worked so hard. I will fast for 40 days, then another 40 days, work, gave proselytizing.
Did you really fast for 40 days? You beat me. I only fasted for 7 days a few times in the Moonies, but I'm impressed. 40 days is a really long time.
Steven, I mean, imagine the weather in Cuba. There were little, we have little means. It was not super hard, and I was young, like 21. My body supported it. To this day, my body is asking, for what I did. Like my body aches almost every day now. But at the time was like that. This is the least I can do. This is the least If there's anything I'm going to do with my life, it's going to be this. My salary.
Yeah, but 40 days, I'm like, Jesus did a 40-day, Moses did a 40-day, but most people ever do 40-day things. But it shows you're a true believer.
Like, who would doubt about me, right? Not even myself. Anyways, I stayed there for almost 4 years. Being paid very little, really. And I got to visit, I had permission to go back to Mexico to visit my family once a year for maybe 8 days, tops 10 days, no more. And I wouldn't know anything about what was happening to my family. I was like, even my sister, in those years, I have one sister, she became a member of the cult. And
I was going to ask you about siblings because you want to save them
family
too.
So at some point, my parents and my sister were members of the cult. I brought them. That's why I was really special. Like I brought my parents. They left eventually.
Right.
My sister left eventually. But at that moment, she was in there. She was suffering a lot. She was in the teen ministry. She was being bullied and mistreated in so many ways. And she asked me, please don't go back to Cuba. I'm feeling very alone. Her parents were not members at the moment. And I was like, and she was crying. She was 14. And I told her, I can't. God will send you people to feel better. You're going to get stronger. Continue. Don't give up. I need to go back to Cuba. Like abandoning my own sister too.
Well, I'm sure you asked permission of your superior and they said, no, God needs you in Cuba.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And then in Cuba, I asked one day, I thought, hey, what if someday I need to go back to Mexico. I need to go back to finish my degree. What if I ask permission to do my social service here in the embassy of Cuba? Surprisingly, wonderfully, they accepted me. I started working for the Embassy of Mexico in Cuba, like the dream career for someone who studies international relationships. And at some point, word from Mexico City leaders came to say, hey, you need to give up your job because you're not there to do that. You're there to evangelize. And I quit.
Right.
And when I quit, the ambassador called me to his office and said, I just want to make sure that you're okay, that everything's fine, because it's a great opportunity. This is like your dream. Like this is just one door, more doors will be open.
Right.
Another minister from the embassy called me to his office and said, I want to see you in the eye and say, and I want you to tell me that you have something better, because this is once in a lifetime opportunity. This is your career in international affairs. And I was like, with a smile, of course I have something better, right? Like, and I could not explain it, but in my mind was like, what could be better than studying the Bible with people and save them? So yeah, I quit. It wouldn't be the only time. I think these groups also, as you said, ask you to miss school if that's in the middle of your meetings. Leave your interests,
Right.
leave your passions. Nothing else can be bigger than your than the church, than your meetings, right? So eventually,
Church equals
exactly,
God.
exactly.
That's, human institution equals God. So if you question the group or Kip McKean, you're questioning God. So you're now being attacked
Yeah.
by Satan
And
and
I came back
demons.
to Mexico City, and that's when this big crisis comes to fruition for the Boston movement.
Mm.
It's a letter written by a leader. It's leaked. Is the beginnings of internet. I studied. That's where I found reveal.org. I'm so
Was it Henry
yes, Henry
Criete's
Creed's
letter, or
letter,
is it? Oh, it was. Okay.
and
My neurons
oh my
fired
goodness,
when
yeah,
you
that's the
mentioned
one.
that.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously, that letter never came to Mexico. I mean, it was leaked, it was online, but not that many people had access, and let alone in English.
Oh, it was
Exactly,
in
exactly.
English
I
too.
read it
Right.
and I felt like,
Right.
what is this? What did I gave my life to in Cuba? What did I taught all these people? Yeah, I know I was not living in luxury as they're describing it for leaders in the United States or in Europe. I know I was not living like that,
Right.
but I know I thought these and these things to people. Like
Mm.
I wanted to leave. I was dating my now husband at the time, and I told him, hey, I don't know if I'm going to continue here. Like, this is too much. Nothing is being talked in Mexico about this. And I can't. And I know he
So
was
was
a
he a
member.
member
Obviously,
too?
I followed all the rules.
Ah.
We followed all the
Oh.
rules.
Just double
and
checking.
it,
Did you
no,
recruit
no,
him, or came
he
in through
became
someone
a
else?
member at 17. So I
Ah.
told him, I know we would, if I leave, we won't be able to continue a relation because that's the norm. You can only date these people or else.
Right.
And he suggested me talk to the main leader of Mexico. He would know what we're really doing with this Henry Creed letter. I talked to him, and
Mm.
strangely enough, he accepted to see me. And he basically, apparently he was vulnerable, open, but really he was just trying to say, like, he played the card of, you know, you don't leave your family when they get things wrong. We need you. We need people like you. And again, the love bombing, there's so many things to change, but I can change it by myself. There's so many people that want things like they've ever been.
Mm.
So I stayed for 20 more years.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. And nothing really changed deep, right? Deep inside. I even realized moving then in time. Eventually, at some point, it was my husband and I working together for the cold in Mexico City, leading groups of 100 to 100 different groups. One of those groups,
So you were
yes, we
married
got
in the
married in the
group?
group. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We were
Right.
we
Got
were
it.
sent to plant a mission in another city in Mexico. As we were just dating,
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to marry me before leaving to plant the church. He was told no.
Mm.
First the mission, wait for a year, like that kind of things. He was
Mm.
asked at some point. He was asked to finish like our relationship because I was not spiritual enough. I asked many questions. Sometimes I asked questions. Anyways,
Mm.
we worked together. We tried after the letter. We tried to make a difference. It was not possible. I spent 20 years trying to make a difference
Mm.
inside. And just to realize one day,
Mm.
after years of therapy, after reading resources like your books, other books, and then therapy here in Boston years after, I realized that was never going to happen, but I totally believed it, that we could make a difference. So
Right.
yeah, we were fired basically in Mexico by one very authoritarian leader who said my husband
Mm-hmm.
was not a Timothy, which meant a Timothy to Paul. Like, a son, an obedient son, and that I was not helping neither. So they let us go. A year after, an opportunity appeared to come to Boston and work for the Spanish speaking ministry. We applied and we got hired. We got brought here, and it was another world, Stephen. I really believed in Boston we were going to be better, like open, probably 10 years ahead of what Mexico was living. It was not the case. It was not the case. The Spanish speaking ministry lived in another reality. Even inside the cult, the Spanish speaking ministry lived another reality. That was when, but for the first time, I realized people were asked to lose their legal status. You know, like people starting telling me these stories about how they became disciples, members of the church in Boston, but they were from Guatemala or from El Salvador, and the ICOC was not there yet. And since the Boston movement or the International Churches of Christ are the one true church, if they left and go back to their countries, they would lose their salvation. What was the answer then? Don't go, stay. And this is so important, especially now, because I have friends in this very moment of history in the United States who are so vulnerable.
Saying that Trump's period of coming into power and being anti-immigrant and going after everybody, not just undocumented, but just anybody who's brown-skinned or Latina, Mexican especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And it breaks my heart because all these people manipulated, indoctrinated, believe this is the only true church. If I go back, because any other person would say, like, there's so many churches. Like, what's the problem with that? Nobody can take your salvation from you. And that gets too well with what you explained, Stephen. This is not a Christian church.
It's a cult.
It is a cult. And they stayed and they missed. Sometimes they stop attending school because now we were undocumented. They are not able to have, a regular job with benefits. And now with so much fear. And that's infuriating. I feel like after starting to understand this, and now I think I can call it like so many crimes occurred in this cult. Yeah. I think being able, I was not able at the time because I didn't have not only the idea, but words to describe what was happening. At some point, being here in Boston, I felt like this is weird. The church treated the Spanish speaking ministry in such a different way. It was basically like nobody wants to lead the Spanish speaking ministry because talking about leaders, because there's no growth there, like real growth, like going to lead an important church around the United States. And it's so like niche. I don't know how else to explain it. And yet, seeing those differences, seeing and listening to stories of people who still believe, but God blessed me because look, I'm still here. I have this, I have that. They wouldn't have all those things in their country of origin or here, but they didn't have to stay and lose everything. So
if I may interrupt for 1 second, just to say that cults like the Moonies, like the International Churches of Christ, the leadership thinks the ends justify the means. They think they're above the law. And they never consider the feelings and the needs of the members. They'll always put the group goals ahead of the members, like them telling me to drop out of college, telling you to drop out of college with 1 semester to go. So this is just, another thing that proves the DNA of this group is bogus, that it's not a legitimate Christian organization.
Totally. And I remember feeling like, this is interesting. There's some things that we already kind of taught in Mexico, but were never taught in Boston. Like in Boston, you still had the feeling of everyone believes it's the one true church. The lead evangelist, that's how they're called. Though he called himself the CEO of the Boston Church. This guy believes to this day, like, if there's any other Christian out there, and I'm talking about 2023, if there's they will come to us. I asked him, hey, so are we ready to leave alone the singles and let them have the romantic life as they please, because we trust them that they do great decisions, they're adults. And he was eventually able to say, no, people need to come through us and follow this path.
Yeah, there's no other legitimate path to salvation other than this group. They're the true Christians. All other churches, all other denominations are satanic, or they're just not God's chosen.
And I realize how, especially here in Boston, how they rebrand themselves so many times as needed. Like to this day, as you know, they're in almost every college in Boston, which is not a little thing.
And they were kicked off, a whole bunch of them, of decades ago through our efforts.
But every time they get back. So these days, they call themselves Alpha Omega. Alpha Omega. That's a front group.
New front group.
So that's their front group. They're all so cute. They're students from Harvard, MIT, Boston University, Boston College, all the colleges in Boston. But they will never know. One day, the same CEO, self-proclaimed CEO, said that students wouldn't even know who is International Churches of Christ. They only know Alpha Omega. And they would never find information.
Well, we're putting Alpha Omega on the blog, and we'll make sure it gets in the search engines. But, universities used to protect their students. They used to have me speak to their freshmen and their transfer students about cults. There was a whole list of destructive groups that wanted to recruit on Boston University campus, for example. And they used to want to protect their students, but over time, the universities, I think, this is just my speculation, they didn't want to dissuade parents from sending their kids to their universities because there were cults on the campus. So it became a financial PR thing to pretend that there's no problem.
Yeah. Wow.
And which is really terrible.
Yeah. And all this criticism, because there's been news programs, even inside the universities, the colleges, they have like specific articles. It will always be called persecution. I remember not so long ago, the oldest daughter of this leader, she was at Northeastern University, and she was called. She was called to the administration, I don't know, the board, because someone said that she was harassing this person who, put that on there. And that she was called, she was like asked, they follow this process, but then nothing really happened, maybe they call her attention.
Right.
But that was like, since that day, she became a martyr. Like, see, persecution, but she didn't stop. She is probably will inherit some form of leadership here in Boston.
Yeah, when you're in a cult, they prime you to be persecuted because Jesus was persecuted and other great leaders were persecuted. So then they say, see, it proves that we're doing God's will because Satan wants to stop us. So they twist it for their own purposes.
And also, something that was like really, I didn't understand it at the beginning, was the amount of money that is asked from people. Not only the regular contribution, as they called it, not only special contribution, which is every year with a goal. You need to pledge, you need to write down how much you're going to give this year. But also at some point in the past 12 years, I can't remember when that started, but people were asked to come, people who were close to retirement, to special dinners. And we were supposed to be there, like helping people or serving people. But I realized later that it was to ask people to put the Boston church in their wheels.
Oh, yeah, that's very common with cults. They want to go after vulnerable people. They'll mow their lawns and help them out in order to change the wills, to give the cult the money.
Beneficiaries and their insurances, their retirement, their wheels. And that's like, I never saw that. And I was like, and interestingly enough, like even how we call people, like the outsiders, right? I never heard that word before moving to Boston, but the kids or the people who were not, like, especially the kids who would be recruited, young people, they were called Gentiles. And I was like, how? We're not even Jews. Like, what do you mean?
Right.
And this, like, making this difference of being chosen, being special, needing to continue the kingdom growing, or manipulating people to feel like you need, after you die, you're going to heaven, obviously, but after you die, you really need to make sure that you're going to make a difference, that you're going to let a legacy, right? Like you're going to do something real important with the money that you have, that you would left. And that was like, I couldn't believe it, Stephen. So,
yeah, it's undue influence is what it is. Question, did you ever hear of Flavel Yakeley's book, The Discipling Dilemma?
Oh, yes. But it was while I started like falling apart.
When you were questioning, you mean?
Yeah, when I was questioning.
Can I just quickly say that Kip McKean was infiltrating mainstream churches of Christ and splitting congregations by having people recruited into his cult. This is from Buddy Martin, where he was like trying to educate the mainstream groups. These people are not part of us. They call themselves Church of Christ, but they're not Church of Christ. And so Kip said, we're just making disciples for Jesus. And the psychologist who was part of the mainstream Church of Christ named Flavel Yakeley did a research project. It was quite fascinating. I'll keep it very short, but there's a book online. I'm pretty sure it's linked from reveal.org. But he got permission from Kip to do a psychological study of members. And so he gave them the Myers-Briggs personality inventory. Wow. And I'm forgetting how many hundreds, I want to say 800, filled it out. But then he asked them to fill it out again the way they would answer before they got into the Boston Church of Christ. And then they filled it out again. And then he asked them, fill it out one last time, imagining that you're in the church of this group for another 5 years, and fill it out again. And what he showed was that there was a normal personality distribution before the cult, but there was a direct move to one personality type, which was the super salesman extrovert type.
Yeah.
And he brought the results to Kip, and Kip said, no, this is not right. And besides, you have no control group or whatever. So Yakeley asked people in legitimate religions to do that. There was no change of personality type. Then he did it with 4 or 5 other cults, including the Moonies and other groups. And there was a similar cloning, he called it,
Yeah.
type of thing. It was a fascinating study because Buddy would say, God has all 16 personality types. There's not just one. And you can't say the introvert is inferior to the extrovert. The extrovert's going to be more successful recruiting new members to be fruitful, but the introvert isn't comfortable walking up to strangers, at night, to proselytize, to invite them to free volleyball or dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just a fascinating window into the idea that these cults are cloning people in the image of the cult leader.
Yeah. I mean, when I read that, I was like, I was amazed, first of all, that Kip allowed that. And the only explanation was because it was going to give him some form of, fame. Like, he liked that so much.
Well, he believed that it was going to help him get more recruits.
Exactly.
He didn't realize that what Yakeley was up to, and Yakeley was very creative.
Oh my goodness, that was amazing. And then discover, like, while trying to recover myself, I saw through that also, and through therapy, I saw like, oh my goodness, I'm actually an introvert, Stephen. But I was taught to go outside and to be this person and to be incited, the Bible, to be everything for everyone. And in that,
your cult identity. I was similarly, I was an introvert too. I was a bookworm. I was very uncomfortable talking to strangers and things. I was shy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And then realizing like, all this, and that personality, that cult personality started very early. Like people, when I was in the college ministry back in Mexico, everyone were dressing the same.
Right.
Same hairstyle. Same words like it was so important to this day. Staff meetings here in Boston to this day. Well, 2022, because I don't go anymore, obviously. They will still talk about recruiting sharp people, which means with potential for leadership, with money, or with good looks.
Or special talents.
Or one special talent. And the most celebrated baptisms in college would be when one from Harvard and MIT, like everyone will just give a round of applause. So that is still to this day the most important thing. And the logic is because we need leaders. If we only have ships, like where are we going to take the kingdom of God? We need leaders. We need people with money so we can continue, advancing the kingdom. And there's no shame in that. Like no shame to say it out loud, at least in the staff meetings. Anyways, 2023
so
came. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I hate to interrupt you because this is your interview, but I just want to say that so many people who was recruited into this cult had such bad experiences that when they left, they never wanted to study the Bible again or go to any church. So when cult members or leaders would say, yeah, but we're bringing people and exposing them to the Bible, that this is a good thing, I'm like, yeah, but how many people have you turned off to the Bible because of your abuse? How many relationships were broken up? How many families were separated from each other? So there's a real cost, from this.
Yeah.
And I suspect you, like me, I felt guilty for all the people I recruited into the Moonies.
Absolutely. Especially after the Henry Kriete letter. That's when I felt the guiltiest the most. And then, realizing, again, like here in Boston, the misogyny from the main leadership, it's rampant. The homophobia, and even the racism. So at some point,
I'm glad you're mentioning all three of these because it's really true.
It is true. And when I got to see that specific, like the racism part, even more was pandemic, George Floyd. And
Mm-hmm.
I was asking to do something, like, because the Boston church would never, ever talk about anything politics, like, ever. Because the most important thing is the kingdom and heaven, right? So, and they were, by not only by us, but by me, but a group of people who were asking, like, what are we going to say? How our brothers of color are feeling? They had to do something, but everything was just so cosmetic, so superficial. And then I realized at some point, I felt like we became tokens. Like, in the staff, it was just my husband and I.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about region leaders, how we
Right.
were described. It was just us, and then a couple of African descendant, in leadership that I can think of. Talking about region
Mm-hmm.
leaders. The rest, maybe one other, one guy from Colombia, but really married with a white lady. So it felt like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here we are, and we don't really have any saying in this. Like, and they started to tell me things like, Tania, this is too intense for you. You're like, your emotions are over the top. Like, this is not a good example. Like, I was asked to remember that I'm supposed to be quiet, obedient, smiley,
Submissive.
submissive, and at some point I was told things in the staff, in the middle of staff meetings, things like, now people is not thinking of you as they used to, because you get too emotional with these topics. What topics? About racism, about at some point we revised our role in the church, the women's role in the church. It was awful.
Mm.
We went backwards, in my opinion. And
Women should be submissive, and if the husband wants sex and the woman
oh
doesn't,
my
she
God.
has to
Yeah,
submit.
yeah.
And if I can add one more thing,
Hmm.
that I have an online course that I created with the help of a social work professor for trained psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers and counselors. And in it, I feature an ex-member of the Boston Church of Christ, a woman, a former leader.
Mm,
She was in 13 years. Her husband abused
mm.
her, raped her,
Yeah,
at one point put a gun
yeah.
in her mouth
Ugh,
and said he was going to kill her. And she'd go to her discipling partner and they'd be like, what did you do to bring this onto yourself?
of course.
It was making her completely crazy.
Mm,
Then he got out and then tried to forcibly make her leave, which made her really confused and crazy.
mm.
And she finally left, and she had like a breakdown and was in and out of psychiatric facilities for 11
Oh.
years, misdiagnosed.
Mm.
Even though she told them she had been in a cult for 13 years, they put her on 19 different medications because nobody's trained on how to work with people
Totally.
in cults.
Yeah.
And this woman is brilliant. She went on, I work with her intensively. She went on to get a PhD,
Mm.
got married, had 2 kids, and got off all of her medication.
Wow.
But it wasn't from the mental health system. But this was the same cult,
Yeah. Totally.
that you were
And,
in.
and that's why it makes so much sense. Like, now I realize international churches of Christ are not churches. It's organized crime, because so many crimes become like the norm for so many people, especially children, who, by the way, are meant to be hit by their parents.
Corporal
Corporal
punishment is another thing I constantly talk against.
Yeah.
Go on.
Women, of course, and minorities, like people of color. Like, the leadership and the people who have a say in things will always be white, old guys, mostly. And from there,
Right.
everything will go down, and everyone should
Right.
be obedient. But
White supremacy.
White supremacy at its best. And then it came 2023. January 1st, 2023, Rolling Stone magazine article talking about the International Church of Christ in California. Women, suing the church there for not, being abused, sexual abuse, minors, people manipulated, parents mostly, to not say anything, and leaders refusing to follow the law. I know this would sound like very ignorant of me, but being a mandated reporter, that was something I didn't even know. In 12 years being in Boston staff, we never received a training. I never knew I was a mandated reporter. I discovered that when I heard about the lawsuits in California, and it connected with me immediately that very day, because a few years before, 2 different women in my ministry had approached me to tell me their kids, their daughters, were abused. And the leaders at the time in the Spanish-speaking ministry told them not to go to the police, told them to put the church on top of their minor children.
Right.
And at the time I was like, that happened 20 years ago. I was not even here. I didn't know I was a mandated reporter. And I was like, okay, like these moms were feeling so guilty. Their relation with their daughters was broken.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, what can we do? Like trying to be, bring them some empathy and being with them. But then when I read the lawsuits, I'm like, these same situations have happened in Boston, in the Spanish-speaking ministry. Again, the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And when we are told this is happening, this lead evangelist sent us the article actually saying, this is the devil persecuting us. This is the devil trying to distract us from the mission, from our great work and the great year we're going to have. And, it's just that poor written article from someone who doesn't know anything about us and who's being informed by bitter people. And that day...
all ex-members are bitter, supposedly.
Obviously. And that day, Stephen, I knew, this is it. This is my exit. We are not going to do the right thing. I just knew it, Stephen. And I felt like, and this is the hill. How's that saying? This is the hill I'm going to die. Because this has to do with people I know, and we are not going to treat them like that anymore. The leader who used to lead the Spanish-speaking ministry, I knew in those days, was accused of sexually harassing men in the Spanish-speaking ministry. He was just removed with honors after a great, preaching Sunday. And to this day, he and his wife are members in another with influence and close to young couples and people. I knew that. I ended up knowing about 6 different situations of abuse just in the Spanish-speaking ministry. I brought this to the staff. Like, you always say you love your Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters. I hope you don't only love how they cook or how hard they work, because they will be cleaning or doing anything, cooking especially for free. But this is our brothers and sisters. We cannot ignore it because the answer was going to be, we hate that is happening out there. We are against all forms of violence or abuse, but never recognize that happened in Boston. So they prefer to fire us, my husband and I. They took us out for a leave. They obviously argued my mental health. It was my problem. Like, they even say that I was not in a good place and that I needed to rest.
Well, you weren't. You were you realized you were following false. You were in a
Yeah,
cult.
yeah.
I was going to ask you about your husband, if you influenced your husband to have doubts or whether he was having his own doubts, but not sharing them with you. Because I've heard that over and over again, where both couples were afraid to
I
even share
know.
what they were actually thinking and feeling with
We
each
had,
other.
I think my process of, even my therapeutic process and my process of deconstructing and questioning, and it lasted at least 8 years before being able to leave.
Uh-huh.
And all those years I shared things with him. At some point I remember telling him every time we needed to go to the staff meeting, I was like, I hate it. Next time I'm going to lie. I'm going to say I'm sick. I cannot go to my staff meetings anymore. It's awful. And he was feeling like, that's not correct. Like, is there anything good you can take from the meeting today? And I was like, no, I hate it. What part of I hate it?
He probably felt like he was responsible for your
Totally, because
salvation, so he had to keep
that's
you
what it
in.
thought. And I was like, at some
Yeah.
point we talked during those years. I know I can't just leave. I would leave today, but I can't because it's my job, right? But that's your
Yeah.
job. And they're not going to allow you to stay leading anything if I leave. So I will just swallow things year after year. But he knew. We talked. At that moment, I told him, this is too much. I don't care. I'm sorry. And I think our friendship endured that, and we left together. We left
Good.
together. We are even, rediscovering our relationship, ourselves.
That's great.
He's still a believer. I think he would still call himself a Christian. I'm in another route.
He's but not in the
Not
Church
at
of
all.
Christ. He's a Christian. Got it.
Yeah.
I need to ask you, we're going to need to wrap up
Yeah.
soon, but I'm curious, did you ever want to have
Yeah,
children together? And what
we
was...
have one kid. He's 17 now. We try our best to be
Okay.
open with him and tell him exactly what was happening and what was about to happen before we were fired. He was scared, especially because in his experience, he has never saw us before doing anything else. And his main worry was like, how are we gonna like make a living?
Right.
But I feel like to this day, it's like keeping the communication open and be as transparent as we can. And even our journeys that are now so different, and how it still makes sense to be together, my husband and I, and him being, a witness of all this. I'm really happy to remember, when people leave the cult, obviously they're bitter, they just want to sin, so many things, right? But most of all, about married people, it's like they're not gonna last, they're gonna get divorced, and I believe that, like, that's terrible, that's awful, like, how scary, right? And now I understand. I'm so glad for those people who eventually discover, no, it doesn't really make sense to be together now, like, right? It could be part of whatever journey they're going through, and some people will find meaning in continuing together, and it doesn't have anything to do with living the cult. If they have now a different relationship or a new relationship, it's also an opportunity.
Right.
So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I can tell you my memory is, when people are married in the group, first they have to get permission to date, they have to get permission to kiss the first time, they often have to double date and all of that. And but people would have to report on their spouse if their spouse was having doubts, and then talk to the other discipling partner, because women will be discipled by women and men is my recollection.
Totally.
But
Was something was told about us, and that was like, in the staff, we can work with him, but she's not in a good place. Like, we can still work with him. And when we were fired, which, by the way, we were mobbed by four couples and us, telling us all kinds of things,
Mm.
terrible things. They told him in front of me, I was there, that it was his fault, that he was not a leader, that he was not a man for not helping me. And that just was so infuriating, Stephen, because I was there, like, it was never important. Right. And my husband never, like told on me because we were really like, anything we need to deal with us first. Like our friendship, our relationship needs to be able to like serve even for that. Right. So,
Yeah, you have integrity. I need to ask you this. We're running long, but I don't mind if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Did you ever experience breaking sessions, or did he ever experience breaking sessions?
Would you explain a little more about what you're referring to?
So I helped people who were subjected to basically emotional assaults by 2-3 members. You're so selfish. You need to repent because you are not fruitful, and on for hours. And they'd cry. No, but you really haven't repented properly, and on and on and on, breaking. And then often another baptism was required for them to get back.
I experienced that since I studied the Bible, because I was not broken enough about the cross, about Jesus dying on the cross. And that study of when I needed to confess my sins was twice.
Counting the cost is the Bible studies that are the sequence of that's cherry picked and overemphasis on obedience and ignoring
you
love
got it
and
right,
grace
and I love it.
all of
I love it, Stephen. And then many times, I remember one specific being in Cuba, I was accused of being flirting, having this attitude, because at school, because I needed to go to school, the only people who would come with me to our Bible studies were men. And now, like lately, they will give me a prize for bringing men, because there's always more women than men. But in those years, it was a problem, and it was a me problem. So I was basically a prostitute. I was basically a whore, and I needed to change. And it was like 3 other ladies.
You were a prostitute or a whore, but you couldn't kiss them or date them without permission, right? But again, it's this twisted, weird, warped
that's exactly the word. It's so weird, so twisted, because at some point I dated someone in Cuba, a Cuban, and we were allowed, at some point we would just hold hands. Not even one kiss like this, not even that. Holding hands only once a week. We were allowed to get together once a week for 2 or 3 hours, no more, because there was so much work to do. And I remember feeling like I was gonna die of sadness, crying. And I started from that day. That's why I fasted so much in Cuba. I wanted to be, my prayer, Stephen, was, I want to be invisible to men. I don't want any man to see me ever while I'm here, because I want to save souls. And though my mission is women, but I was broken. And obviously going to the latest thing, those sessions, we have like at least 4 sessions with these 4 different couples of main leadership in Boston. They will say all kinds of awful things to us. From what I was lying, how I was twisting the scriptures, how my husband was teaching false teachings. We were accused of that. A letter was sent about us around the Spanish-speaking ministers in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean, letting everyone know that we were no longer members, and they needed to be careful with what we were teaching, because it was false teaching. We were preached about on Sundays for a good number of Sundays. And it's like, and I remember once sharing with the the wife of the main leader and my discipler at the time, I told them, I really want to talk to you about this religious abuse and abuse of power. I've been living with this couple. And they were like, oh, it's no way near sexual abuse, right? No, but this is so awful. Like, we should be trained about this, we need to stop abusing our power and traumatizing people, because now and the wife told me, and these are people who went to college, all of them. Like they have some education, and she told me, you should stop seeing your therapist, Tania. She's so worldly. The only approved therapists are the Christians inside the group.
Right. That's another great point, that cults will and it's a violation when you're a therapist to have a dual relationship. So if you're in a cult, but you're being asked about the member who's having doubts, the key is to keep them in and not say, you're miserable, time to leave. It's okay to leave. I interviewed a woman who was an Opus Dei who had a psychiatrist in the cult that was giving her prescription medication, and she was just wanted to be free.
Exactly.
She wanted to live a life. But
and
it's such a violation
of being free. I felt once they let us go, the leader very graciously told us two things that I remember very well. One thing was, Tania, you accused us of being scared, that we didn't talk about anything because we were scared of being sued. You know what? We're not scared. Bring it on. And I told them, like, none of the 6 different cases I knew about, none of them wanted to sue the church. None of them. That's not our nature. That's not how we were trained. And then the second thing was, you know what? We're not obligated to give you guys anything. But we're going to do what Christ will ask us to do. And we're going to give you some severance. But that severance will be tied to you not talking about any...
non-disclosure agreement. Was it also a binding arbitration?
Yeah.
Non-disclosure? I'm just curious, because that's another scam that cults will have members, before they leave, get them to sign, so that they can't go to a court of law. They have to go to an arbitrator, and the arbitrators are typically, financed by the group.
I remember, I have it and I printed it. But I remembered, basically, I was not going to be able to talk about any of this, especially, the cases I knew about. They wanted me to tell them the names of the people so they could just reach out to them. Some gave me permission, and I gave them the names of them. I would say from the 6, 3 of them are still, 3 of the cases I know about still members. Other 3 broke free. But yeah, it was basically, you will only be able to talk about this with your husband. Nobody else, no other form. Like, doing this today with you, talking about this would never be possible. But I didn't sign. And it felt so good, Stephen.
So you didn't sign the non-disclosure. I'm relieved, because I don't want you to get into trouble.
I didn't,
doing
and
this
that
interview.
felt like the last test I had to overcome, to feel they don't own me, they don't own my voice, and I'm out. I'm out. That day was the last day I saw any of them. I blocked them all. Like, reaching out to me, it was way before. Asking anything was before.
Right.
And that was the last day I saw any of them, and it felt so free. But it was a challenge, because, it was going to be a severance that will help us while finding a job. And I found a job 3 days after.
So they didn't give you money, and you didn't sign the non-disclosure.
No money after more than 20 years working for this cult.
Kudos to you. I'm not sure we can talk about it, but I'm not sure you can't still do something more. But
Yes.
we're going to need to wrap up. Last
Yeah.
words
Well,
are yours.
it's my last words I want to share today would be: there's hope, there's life. It is a challenge. It feels so good to reclaim myself, Stephen. It is so great to have people like
Mm-hmm.
you, whom for so many years, like your work and others, like that work eventually will land on in our hands, in the hands of people who are feeling alone, doubting, struggling in some form, if you want to call it. And but it feels so good. I wouldn't change it. The only thing might change is living 20 years ago. But
Finishing
I
your
finished later.
degree and
Yes.
oh,
Thank
you
you so
did.
much.
Congratulations. I'm glad we got
Yeah.
that in, because I went back to college too, and it's
Yeah.
really a blessing, to use that term, but it was for me to be able to feel a completion. But I never went back to
Oh my
poetry. I
goodness.
went to
But
psychology
it was
because I wanted to understand what the
totally,
hell did they
totally.
do
And
to
then
me.
just having a space for people to tell the story, even being a safe space for some people who would just not only want to share but feel that they're not alone. And I'm really happy. I'm really
Right.
thankful. And I'm at this time 48, but I feel like there's so many things that I still can do.
You absolutely. And thank you we're going to tell your story in the updated Espanol edition of
Yeah,
Combating Cult Mind Control with
thank you for including me.
Sochiel and some others. Need
Yep.
to run. Thank you so
Thank you, Stephen.
much.
Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah, you too. Bye.